So I have now the pleasure to introduce to you Gerald Leitner. Gerald Leitner is a long member of the library community or family, like we also have our family, you have your family. But these two families have a lot of touch points. Some of them are comfortable, some of them are a little bit difficult. So, but we both of this family always try to find solutions. Therefore, IFRRO is a strategic partner for IFRRO for a long time. And Gerald Leitner is the CEO of IFRRO since 2 years, I think about. Before he was in several functions of the International Federation of Library Association in different committees and so on. And before that, I think you have been CEO of the German Library Association, of the Austrian, sorry, it's almost a mistake, German too, of the Austrian Library Association. And yes, we are eager to listen to you now and to hear how the librarians, the world, and what your view into the future is. Please.
Thank you, Rainer, for this very kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me to your great congress here. I appreciate it. It's my third one where I can join you, and always fascinating which program you are doing here. Just to say, I'm not born as a librarian. Before I joined the library field, I was journalist and worked also for publishing companies. I worked for the main 2 Austrian newspapers and was responsible there for culture. This means I know several parts of our 2 families, I would say, as Rainer said. What I would like to do is to invite you to join, to work together with us on our major project which we have for the future. It's the so-called Global Vision project. You see here a map of the world, which is quite different to other maps of the world. Usually you see maps with borders, here you see maps with connections. The idea of the Global Vision project is to connect people, to connect organizations, to make the world together a better one. That's a big word, and I guess to make the world better, this is our whole aim, where we are sitting here together, and this unites us, and for this we should work. And as Rainer said before, we have all different views, but I guess we have one view which unites us to do this job for the world, and we should think on this job and not so much on what divides us. Some words about IFRRO. IFRRO is the global voice of libraries. We are the leading international body representing the interests of library information services and their users. We are an independent, non-governmental, non-for-profit organizations with 1,300 members in over 145 countries of the world. Our headquarters is in Den Haag in the Netherlands, but we have also regional offices in Latin America, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in Africa, in Pretoria, in South Africa, and in Asia, in Singapore. The real treasure for me is the biggest brain trust which we are hosting at IFRRO. We are organized in 60 standing committees where 1,200 top experts are working on all what matters for the library field. Of course, copyright, legal matters, of expression, digitization, cataloging, all what is important for libraries. There is 1,200 experts are working permanently on it, producing standards, guidelines, and support for the global library field. And as Rainer said, I have the great pleasure to be now almost 2.5 years Secretary General of this organization. By the way, we are following you. We are organizing next year our General Assembly and Congress also here in Athens. We are doing it yearly with we expect that we will have next year here 4,000 to 5,000 attendees at our Congress here in Athens. And it's quite a challenge, as you can manage to do this here. But we see, and I hope to see some of you also at our Congress. When I came in to IFRRO, I could build up really on a success story over the last years. But as one of my most beloved writers, the Italian writer Giuseppe Tommaso di Lampedusa says, if you want that things stay as they are, you have to change the things. This means success is only possible if you change things. And this we are doing hard at IFRRO. And I would like to give you an overview how we intend it and to get you on board also. It's clear, the global answer to the challenging facing the library field can only overcome with a global response and not just with individual ones. This is the main idea of the Global Vision Project. And with this idea, we will also transform our organization, IFRRO, to a more open, inclusive, participatory organization as before. This means we want to bring more people on board. For example, we are lowering tremendously our membership fees for individual members, and it's going down to give more people the chance to become members of IFRRO. We are changing our decision processes, as you will see. This means decisions will be made in the future more with the input of members and also from people of outside. Of course, at the end, our governing board decides about, but the decisions will be made by the input of members more as ever before. Yeah, and when I say an open, we will change it to a more open organization, then it means also we want to be more open to our key partners. This means also to you. We are interested also to work more with you together, better as ever before. This is the intention of our global vision discussions which we are doing. We have started this with 6 very simple questions to the whole library field. This means we wanted to hear from librarians from all over the world what are their thoughts on it, what are the core values, where we librarians are exceptionally good, where we could do more or less, what are the main challenges, and what could be the characteristics of a globally united library field. And we were overwhelmed from the engagement of our colleagues. We didn't expect it. We had high expectations, but what came in exceeded all our expectations. We got feedback from colleagues from 190 countries of the United Nations. As you know, in the United Nations we have 193 countries and we got response from 190 countries. This is the biggest actions IFRRO ever did. We organized 185 workshops all over the world with different groups. This means we organized regional meetings where we invited the main representatives from the countries in these regions. We organized national workshops where the representatives from the national organizations, so we organized meetings for special interest groups. This means we had a variety of 185 workshops in 1 year all over the world, and in these 185 workshops more than 9,000 people attended and gave us their feedback in 2 days discussion. It were very intense discussions with different groups, as I said. And we were also able to set up an internet platform as a discussion board where more as 21,000, almost 22,000 people gave us response to this question. Altogether with it, we got 600,000 answers to this question. 600,000 answers from all over the world, from 190 countries, from all continents, which was an enormous challenge for my team, really to figure it out, to analyze all this answer. And what I'm really happy about, that we got all library types on board. This means it's not just concentrated on one library type, and that we got all generations on board. We have input from very experienced library leaders, but we have also a big impact from young professionals, new professionals, who are working only for 1 to 10 years in libraries, because we are discussing their future, and this was important for us. We have answers from more than 10,000 librarians, which are working less than 10 years in libraries. And what is for us also important, we got answers from 2,000 key people from outside of the library field, also from authors, publishers, journalists. This means there is a lot of experience from outside of the library field in this report already. 600,000 answers, as I said, an enormous challenge. What to do it to bring a systematic insight, but there we are good, we librarians, as you know, to categorize people, things. And what we were able to do is to bring this together in a review with 10 highlights and 10 opportunities. And I wanted to show you this. We have this report, this review on our website. We have it in the 7 official IFRRO languages. This means it's translated to Chinese, to Arabic, to French, of course, English, German, Italian, and Spanish. And we can also view the full report if you are a data freak, with 760 pages with all the answers categorized, and this with regions, library types, and so on, all open on our website to read. Just to give you here a short rundown about this. What we did is we have one key finding which is essential, and this is very encouraging for us. We are united globally in our goals and values, the library field, really strongly. But what came also up, we must connect global and local actions more effectively. And for this we are working in the future. And we have here in this report on the one hand, the highlights. This means where we are already good. And on the other side, the 10 opportunities where we should work more stronger to get better, to improve. And I would like to give you a short overview now with a video which shows you the 10 opportunities. That is important for us, to work more for our communities, to be clearer, that we must go for technology changes, and that we must better advocate on all levels. This means to become really better in the communities, to go and to ensure stakeholders and explain our values, and to develop a spirit of collaboration. This means also with you to work with partners from outside of the library field. We have to challenge the current structures. We have to maximize access to world's documentary heritage, and what is important, to bring more young professionals in, to give them more chances for the future. And for this we are going to develop the so-called IFRRO Global Vision Store, and to share ideas, to bring this together, to bring ideas from the whole global library field together for new actions. And we are interested also to get ideas from outside of the library field. And because we think a vision without execution is hallucination, as you know. It would be one more paper, this Global Vision Review, which papers are produced all the time with strategy, and where are most of these papers? They are in libraries or they are in a drawer. That is it. And that we exactly that we want to avoid. We want to have actions, actions, and actions to make this vision real. And we want to do it also in a way that not some wise people are sitting there. We love wise people, and we want to get the input from wise people. But we want to get also the people from very normal librarians and from outside of the field. What can we do? How can they get engaged? And how can we work together? And this is the idea of the biggest idea stores for actions, what we want to create. A source of inspiration for all librarians and for IFRRO in planning for the future. As I said, we have here now this Global Vision Report with these 10 opportunities. And what we are going now, we are organizing again, we organized again already workshops, meetings all over the world. We have a platform where all can contribute, also from outside of the library field, where we co-create IFRRO Global Vision's Idea Store for Actions. For what is this Idea Store? It shall be a source of inspiration that the IFRRO Governing Board creates a new strategy with the input of people from outside of the world, a strategy 2019-24 built up on the ideas from librarians from all over the world and with support from key partners. And on the other hand, it's a sort of inspiration for all libraries in the world to start such actions, which they will find at IFRRO's Global Vision and Idea Store, and this will bring more actions of the library field for the people. That's the idea behind. That's a strong idea which we have with enormous effort, and we are overwhelmed again. We opened this platform and we have already 8,000 ideas in this store, 8,000 answers, more than 8,000, and we have it open and we keep it open for you to contribute to get the best ideas in, that we can create our strategy and inspire more libraries for working together to collaborate. This is a time frame just to see it where we are. We are here in September, March, where we are getting all these ideas in, analyzing it, bringing it to the governing board. The governing board will create a strategy till 2019 with this input, and we will launch the strategy here in Athens in August. But it's just the start of it. As I said, we want to transform IFRRO in a way, and this transformation is going on. We will have the strategy ready next year in August, and with this strategy we transform also the governance of IFRRO, all the sections, all the governing board, all the decision processes. This means the ambitious goal is that we have in 2020 a total new IFRRO with new decision processes, a new structure, more open, more inclusive, able to powering literate, informed, and participative societies. And I guess there we are, and this should be an offer for you, because you all have the same aim: powering literate, informed, and participative societies. This unites us, and this could be an offer for you to contribute. What we are going to do is we are organizing a high-level workshop in Den Haag in the Netherlands in the last week of January, where we have the pleasure to get Rainer and Caroline to us. This means IFRRO president, IFRRO president and IFRRO director will join us for sure. IPA will join us with the current president and with the director. This means we're inviting here key partners from outside of the library field to speak about chances for collaboration. Which fields are there where we can work together? Let's discuss what unites us, where we can get stronger together and not always to discuss what divides us. Because I'm so long in the library field and I have the impression that several institutions are just discussing with all the energy what divides us and never thinking about what we can do together. And this is an offer. Let's strengthen our collaboration. Let's work together and achieve what we can achieve together to the better of the world. I'm happy to give answers to questions if you have. Otherwise, I guess we will continue our discussion in the future. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anke Schierholz from the German Visual Collecting Society, and I would like to hear whether IFRRO is still pursuing its campaign with WIPO for unremunerated exceptions for libraries, because this is something which really infects us strongly, and we wish that we would cooperate actually for licensed solutions rather than for unremunerated exceptions.
Good. I guess this is exactly the question for the global vision discussion, which you are giving is for collaboration. I guess we are very clear at IFRRO. I will answer also this question, but we are coming exactly there that we are discussing that what divides us and not what unites us. But I will give you an answer to it. IFRRO is not against licensing. We are against bad licenses. And there are examples of bad licenses against, and we are fighting against. That is not a secret. We will do it also in the future. But be aware that we are not against licensing in total. We are against bad example of licenses. And maybe there we have different views.
Thank you. There's another question here, Anne. And then I have to call this to an end.
Oh, thank you. Anne Bergmann from the Federation of European Publishers. I definitely hope that the European Library Association has the same willingness to engage. I don't think that has been shown in the past, but the future is probably better than the past once we have passed the copyright directive. I just want to make a point and ask, because you always mention licenses, and this was your campaign against the copyright directive in saying there shouldn't be licenses. When I say yours, it's IFRRO, it's EBLIDA, it's Communia, it's the entire community that wanted to weaken or to broaden the exception. Weaken copyright, broaden exception. You speak of licenses. You have the licenses for primary uses. Those are not going to be changed by copyright law because there are contractual licenses between us and our users. You may negotiate them, you may refuse to take them, but that's not going to be affected by copyright law. The licenses you are mentioning are the licenses the people in the room are making. So you pointing them and saying they're giving you bad licenses.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it would be good then that you bring example when a collecting society is not giving you a sufficient good license to be able to do work as a librarian.
Again, this is one of these old questions, what divides us. I came here to discuss about what unites us, and I have now the second question about how it goes always in the history, what it is. I guess you know we have a catalog of examples where we are getting bad licenses. This is open and you can read it. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. I think given the interests of time and the agenda, I'd like to ask you all to join with me in thanking Gerald for his time today, for his frankness and his openness, and to the future.
Thank you.
Hello everybody, it's exactly noon, so I don't know whether to say good morning or good afternoon, but welcome to all of you to this session. My name is Michael Healy. I am the Executive Director for International Relations at Copyright Clearance Center in the United States. And it's a great pleasure to be the moderator of this panel session, which takes us through to 1 o'clock and to lunch. Earlier this morning, when Caroline was talking about the IFRRO strategic plan, she put appropriate and very significant emphasis on the importance of technology for the future of copyright, the future of licensing, and of course, the futures of all our individual organizations here. And technology has played an enormous part in the program for this year's Congress, and I believe appropriately so. And it was center stage, of course, in the excellent international conference we all enjoyed yesterday. And it's very possible your head is buzzing with thoughts of artificial intelligence and robotics and blockchain, etc. If that's the case, then this morning's panel may intensify the head spinning, or I hope calm it a little bit with further explanation about some of these terms and some of these opportunities that face us all. We're going to continue that emphasis in the next hour or so, and I'm very pleased to have three excellent speakers who will navigate us through the next 60 minutes and some of the challenges facing us going much further ahead. I'll introduce each of them in turn now and then hand over the floor to them. They're going to give three very short presentations to set the scene, and then I'm going to help moderate a conversation, and I promise you I will allow plenty of opportunity for discussion and questions from the floor as well. So the first of our three speakers is a colleague and friend of mine, Babis Marmanis, who joined one of the panels yesterday in the international conference. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Copyright Clearance Center. And I asked Babis to give us an overview and some highlights of the key developing technologies that are likely to impact us most going forward. I doubt the second speaker needs much introduction in this group. Adam Suckling is the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian IFRRO, Copyright Agency Limited, and of course almost all of you will know Adam very well. Our third speaker is probably not known to many of you. Sadia Shahid works for a company called Wisdom.ai, where she is the Director of Strategy, Growth and Partnerships. She'll tell you a little bit about that herself a little later on. If you're not familiar with Wisdom.ai, I'm certain you're familiar with their parent company, IFRRO PLC. IFRRO is one of the world's largest and, in fact, global publishing operations, encompassing not just academic publishing, but also events and business intelligence, and is a global force in all of those areas. And the IFRRO group acquired her company back in 2017, and she has continued as Director of Strategy, as I've said, and she's going to be helping us navigate the waters of artificial intelligence and its impact on publishing. So, as I said, short presentations followed by conversation and questions, and at that point I'll just hand over to Babis, if I may.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Michael, thank you for this very nice introduction. Always a pleasure to be at the IFRRO Congress, especially this year that is held in the motherland. As Michael said, I represent CCC. I'm the CTO and EVP. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about technology and the major trends. But before we do that, I want to spend 2 minutes to tell you more about technology at CCC. When we talk about technology at CCC, we do not mean changing the cables in the computers or moving the printers and so on. We really take a strategic view at technology, and technology is interwoven with business strategy. It's a key element of our business strategy. We put our money where our mouth is. 2/3 of our total budget is devoted to engineering and the operations of our software. And everything we do is driven by our customer journeys, the journeys of our rights holders and the journeys of our licensees. As we had yesterday from Roani, and we will hear today from Adam, it is important to experiment with technology and not be left behind. At CCC, I'm advising on technology based on increasing the value that we provide to our customers, and I think that's the right way to approach how you view technology. It's not about technology's sake, it's not about technology itself, it's about how do we give more value to the customer. At CCC, we use a number of the technologies I'm going to mention later today, and you hear from others. You heard already from other speakers yesterday, and you will hear again today. Michael has introduced me to a number of you over a period of time to discuss and explore technology. I look forward to more of those introductions in the future. And with that, I wanted to put forth some of the technology trends. Artificial intelligence and machine learning takes the cake. I think we heard a lot yesterday from Matthias and also from James, and I will dive into it in a minute. Blockchain, a protocol that falls into the general category of distributed ledger technologies, and then we will dive into that a little bit, just a brief overview in a minute. The rising importance of data. We all talk about data and its importance. We see companies assigning chief digital officers, chief data officers, taking a approach on data that seems to be very strategic and not at all tactical. Very important. Privacy and security. So there has been an increase in interest about security and privacy. Actually, privacy matters have become more important due to the social network, the information about how social networks use the information that we give to them, and the security due to high-profile hacking cases. So we'll talk a little bit about that. There are more, of course. Speech recognition, voice-activated interfaces, that's part of the future. If you were to paint a vision for the future in terms of technology, that should definitely be there. How many of you use Alexa? And no one? Nobody uses Alexa. Siri? Google Assistant? All right, well, there we go. Yeah. All right, so all that falls into this category. Other technology trends is the Internet of Things. You might have heard of that. Every device connected to the Internet, every device providing data to an application. There is much more. There's edge computing, quantum computing, and so on. We're not going to delve into that. We will focus on those 4 first trends. And let's start with some clarification of terms, so to speak. Many people use artificial intelligence, machine learning, or even worse, a very specific area of machine learning called deep learning as synonyms. These things are not synonyms, and I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes discussing. Artificial intelligence is a very broad field and consists of many things. One of those things that it consists of is machine learning. I think if you remember, if you were here yesterday and were watching James' presentation, he used circles. And the biggest circle was artificial intelligence, the middle circle was machine learning, and then the small circle inside machine learning was deep learning. So artificial intelligence refers to systems that attempt to behave like humans, or at any rate demonstrate intelligent behavior. Many people associate that with the ultimate artificial intelligence agent, a system that will demonstrate cognition, right? None of the systems we have today stops to ask itself, who am I? Why do I exist? Okay, there is no notion of self. There is only execution of tasks. Now, we have had tremendous progress by expanding in all those components of artificial intelligence, and a lot of great advances have happened. Oops. All right, okay. Just checking that everyone's watching. So the machine learning field has been, the past 3 years, talked a lot about. What machine learning does is provide us the ability to leverage the large amount of data that we have and identify patterns in the data. Those patterns may be related to structures that we have already created and to which we're trying to map our data, or can be algorithms that help us identify structure in the data. A particular area, as I said earlier, is deep learning. Deep learning refers to deep neural networks. One kind of neural network is the kind that you heard yesterday from Matthias, called convolutional neural networks. We're not going to get into that much detail other than the names. Those are very helpful in speech recognition as well as image processing. There's another kind of deep neural networks called recurrent neural networks, long short-term memory in particular, very, very successful. And as you can imagine, you can build many different architectures, and most of the research is focused on doing just that, identifying more effective architectures for deep neural networks. And the great advance in the deep neural networks has been that they tend to perform better with bigger data. So we have a lot of data, and with the advent of cloud computing, now anyone can have supercomputing level computational infrastructure spun up by the click of a button. And those algorithms are also, most of those algorithms are actually offered as service to most of the cloud computing infrastructures. So the fact that the barrier to entry has been extremely low, and the fact that the data available to us has been abundant, has led to the flourish of activity in that area. However, one of the things I wanted to point out here that most of you probably don't know is that deep learning is not actually the best technique to apply for things such as classification of data based on structured data. That honor belongs to an algorithm called XGBoost. And the only reason I bring it up is that, you know, it's not the deep learning is not the panacea. It's just one more technique in that very wide ecosystem, as you can see. So other things that fall into the category of artificial intelligence, natural language processing, very old field, several decades of research and work in that area. And another word that will be very familiar to you, you must have heard of it, the semantic web, semantic search. Yeah. So what do things mean, right? And that is also sub area of NLP, because typically semantics refers to human words, human language words, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Just no. So a few words about blockchain. How are we doing on time? Good. Crank it up, Michael. Signals. Blockchain is a protocol that creates a distributed ledger of transaction. So what's a distributed ledger of transaction? So it's a ledger. Imagine it a long line on the sky where everyone can read from it, everyone can write to it, and no one can tamper with it. That's at least the theory. And as you can understand, a system that can efficiently and effectively do just that is going to offer itself for many things. One thing that I wanted to, so the potential here is tremendous. One thing I wanted to point out is not a single protocol, it is a family of protocols. Most of you know blockchain from Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. There are many other protocols that enable the creation of a distributed ledger of transactions. Some of them follow that Bitcoin-like blockchain protocol, and some of them not. The core of the protocol is based on Byzantine agreement, if you have heard that term, anyone taken computer science course. But in any case, cryptography and random hashing are very important, and no matter what protocol you choose. The important thing to remember here is that descendants of Bitcoin rely on eventual consensus. And nearly all, at least every algorithm I know, makes a very important assumption that the majority of participants are honest. Okay, so 51% of participants in the blockchain have to be honest. It's not an unrealistic assumption, but as we will discuss, and I don't know if Adam will bring it up, if the blockchain is not of a great size, it's not impossible to think scenario where that's compromised, that assumption is compromised. Anyway, the original blockchain disadvantages have been the high computational cost, and the high computational cost resulted in people, if you remember back with the Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, the craze about mining, right? And the mining pools, and you were contributing your computer to a bigger pool, or you were putting some money into a computational resource, common computational resource to mine Bitcoins. So blockchain has, going back just to close this, blockchain has a tremendous potential. Distributed ledger systems, technologies have a lot of potential, and looking forward to hear more about it from Adam. Worth experimenting with. The rising importance of data So data has taken a life on its own, and what people really mean by that is how can we leverage the data that we have to understand our business, understand our customers, understand our operations, understand the market, and how can we leverage all that to make more intelligent decisions going forward. So initiatives about digitally transforming the organization, assigning someone at the top. If you're a large enterprise and you're trying to make your company think digital, you do need someone at the top. You do need someone at the executive level to drive that program. We know that very well from other large-scale programs in large enterprise, such as ERP implementations. You try to drive a spend analysis program in a large enterprise, it won't work without executive support. And all that results in a data-driven enterprise. Privacy and security, very briefly, I think I'm running out of time here, but I'm almost done. Yep. Privacy and security, ISO 27001, SOC 2, I don't know how many of you are familiar with these things, have increased in importance because those are certifications that your organizations can take to prove to the customer that you're doing everything you can to secure your infrastructure. Tracy points to me, but I don't understand what's the time. How much time do I have?
We need to wrap up.
Okay, great. So really quick. The two major questions for artificial intelligence: what rights should be conveyed for processing of creative works by machines, especially for commercial purposes? For example, text processing for copyrighted material for commercial purposes. That's one example. Is the result of these algorithms copyrightable? Yesterday we brought that up on Matthias' talk. Blockchain distributed, like what implications, what does it mean, what does that technology mean for copyright and licensing? Well, clearly registering and clearing of rights can happen on a distributed ledger, controlling and tracking the distribution of registered but also unregistered rights. If the digital work has been uploaded into the distributed ledger, providing evidence of genuine first use, digital rights management, music sites, we saw the examples yesterday with Matthias, digital rights management, smart rights agreements, this is the smart contracts discussion, transmitting payments in real time to owners, since a cryptocurrency can be embedded into the distributed ledger. We discussed about that. I think we can close here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Babis. We're going to move right along and save questions to the end after the discussion. So we're going to hand over to Adam, who's going to talk about a very specific and very interesting implementation of blockchain in the Australian setting. So over to Adam.
Thank you, Michael. Michael, the bad news is my presentation is 20 minutes, but the good news is I'm going to try and do it in 10.
You've only got 5.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm kidding.
Look, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you, Babis. Babis has covered some of the stuff I was going to cover, and so I will skip through some of it. But what I'd like to do is to give you, firstly, a brief history of blockchain and introduce you to the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto. I'd like to talk to you about what blockchain does, and then finally I'll take you through what we're doing and why. And this is it's a sort of reprise of a presentation I gave to our board, and it was a way, I guess, of me getting my head around what blockchain was and getting our board's head around it too. And I always find it's useful to go back to the history and where things came from. So the history of blockchain really is that it had its genesis in the financial crisis of 2008. And I'm sure many of you will remember why that happened, but it occurred for the following reasons. US home buyers took out loans that they couldn't afford. US bankers then packaged those loans up into clever financial instruments called CDOs. Ratings agencies in the US then gave those CDOs a AAA credit rating because they said the returns were secure and consistent. Regulators signed them off, and then smart American bankers on-sold the risk of those CDOs to European bankers, sorry, to the Europeans in the room. Then the people right at the beginning of the chain, namely the US home buyers, decided they couldn't afford the loans anymore, at least some of them, and they dropped their keys in the letterboxes and walked, and the whole system collapsed like a house of cards. Enter the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto, and I guess I think of him as the Banksy of blockchain, in the sense that he's important, or she, widely known of, but no one knows who Banksy, or in this case Satoshi, is. And what he or she and their acolytes were concerned with was really, I mean, two things. They were generally libertarians, so they didn't agree, or they thought the role of government should be minimized. And secondly, they thought that the crash and the financial meltdown of 2008 showed that traditional banking and traditional banking structures didn't work. So they wanted to come up with something which was a part, that the whole design of blockchain right at the beginning was to set it outside of traditional structures of control and regulation. And they did that really in very conceptual broad terms two ways. Firstly, they invented a digital currency, the first one, called Bitcoin, which would allow Party A to pay Party B using a digital coin. And the second thing they did was to invent a distributed ledger, which is a lot of people have talked about, but really it was just a way of recording transactions and having the system then verify those transactions in a manner that everyone could see. Babis went through how that works, and speakers yesterday went through how that worked. I have a section on it, which I'm not going to go through. I did have a section about how I was going to buy the Acropolis from Michael to illustrate the point, but we're running out of time, so you've got the joke. That was all I needed. I'll move on to what it does. What it does is it removes the middleman. So in the case of me acquiring the Acropolis, or the Parthenon, I should say, from Michael, traditionally, if I were to do that, I would have had to have gone through my bank, would have sent his bank money, and you'd have gone through a central clearinghouse. If I used Bitcoin or some other digital currency to buy that item from Michael, it would have just gone, I would send it directly to him without having to go through a middleman. It provides an immutable source of trust, supposedly. Everyone says that. I think the problem is there's lots of consultants in this space that come up with fancy words like immutable. But it does provide, if you've set the system up right, an immutable source of trust. It builds trust between parties, and it automates contracts. You can embed the contractual details of the transaction within the blockchain, and you can have these smart contracts. So that is 7 minutes. There's a whole sort of examples I can talk through in the session. What are we doing and why? I guess when you look at this, when you look at what a lot of people are doing, even people who sort of raise enormous amounts of money through these ICOs, what they're doing is generally quite small scale. They release these things they somewhat grandly call white papers, which explains what they're doing. But when you look into them, often they're small experiments or small proofs of concept, which are about kind of learning by doing. And we thought we needed to do the same thing, because if you think about what I've just gone through and what other speakers have said, it's obviously a threat to potentially companies like ours, in that what we do is we have a centralized repository of data on people's rights. We act as a trusted intermediary generally between the licensee and the copyright owner, and this has the potential to blow it all up. So we are doing, in the same learning by doing way, two discrete projects. The first is in the visual art space. So we license art, and we also administer the resale royalties scheme on behalf of lots of artists, including a large number of Indigenous Australian artists. And so the thing that we're looking at in blockchain is to test in the first instance two things. One, the provenance of a piece of work. So when a piece of work goes, for example, from a gallery in Western Australia, which is where that red dot is, to an art centre in Western Australia to a gallery in Sydney, which is on the other side of the country. We want to test whether we can use a unique identifier to say, yes, that piece of work is painted by that artist and from that art centre, so the provenance of it. And the second thing we want to do, which is specifically around using distributed ledger technology, is to speed up the information that we get from the gallery on when a sale has occurred, and then down the track to see whether actually we can just pay the artist directly from the gallery without the money having to come through us. And that clearly has implications about what CMOs do, because it removes us from the tedious business of working out how much money people are owed and then paying it. But what it does mean is you need someone to be very clear about the policy settings and about the rules and to make sure it's all adhered to. And then the second thing, and I'm racking up, Michael, I can see you looking concerned. The second thing we are going to do with blockchain technology is to see whether we can use it with the media monitoring companies to get information faster on the use of their content by licensees so that we can speed up how quickly we pay them. And it's a similar situation to what I just described with visual arts. It has the potential to remove us from a portion of conducting the payments, but I think it just, the way we look at it is it's a way of just making the scheme that we administer and the contracts that we administer work much more effectively using this technology. We are, I have to say, unfortunately, in our copyright tribunal with many of these companies, so we have an in principle agreement that we will do it, but we need to settle some other things before we do. And that is it, Michael.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Adam. The price of the Parthenon has dropped as a result of your timeliness. So we're going to move on now with Sadia, and then, as I say, we'll continue with questions after the final presentation. So please join me in welcoming Sadia to the stage.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Babis, for laying much of the groundwork for my presentation. So we're all familiar with the terms around artificial intelligence. I work with the Wisdom.ai team, and we were formerly called Colviz Limited. We were incubated out of the University of Oxford Software Incubator, and last year in May 2017, we were acquired by the IFRRO PLC. So now we're a sister company of a much more familiar Taylor & Francis group, I hope. So jumping right in, the speakers before me and much of what you would have been hearing around technology yesterday, all of the innovation and the key developments that surround us today are a direct result of the trillions of dollars spent in research and development every year. By some estimates, around $2 trillion are spent every year on research and by funding bodies around the world, and this results in 3 million papers being published every year by around 8 million researchers across 73,000 journals. But the big challenge here is that 80% of these researchers are never going to publish again. And so in the sea of data, how can we ensure that all the stakeholders in the research ecosystem have access to timely information and at pace to make the decisions that they so desperately need to progress research and development? An example very often cited is that of the p53 protein, which is involved in cancer suppression, and so is for cancer studies. And there are already around 100,000 papers published on the p53 protein alone. An average researcher in their life can only read about 250 papers, so their whole life they wouldn't be able to go through the entire research on just the p53 protein. This is where now we believe that artificial intelligence can help, and that's what companies like Cytoreason here is using to develop personalized cancer treatments for patients depending on their physiology and genome, and going through all of this research literature in an automated fashion. So, and this is not a new concept. In 2009, as early as that, scientists developed Adam, the robot, that was capable of running its own experiments by formulating hypotheses, analyzing data, and then deciding which experiments to run next. And its paper was published in the science magazines. Its findings were there. And NASA has used artificial intelligence to discover 2 new exoplanets already. And it can be tracked back all the way to 1956, when the term was first coined by John McCarthy. And today it's being actively pursued in this research and publishing space. Just in the past few months, if you Google where AI has been applied, we've seen it being used in the diagnosis of early onset of Alzheimer's, in determination of lung cancer types, in diagnosing heart diseases in infants, and not just in STM, really. It's also widely being applied to humanities and social sciences, such as whether AI can produce music comparable to Bach, in social sciences, for example, Instagram applying it to tackle bullying, to make recruiting decisions more diverse, and to fix gender problem on Wikipedia, for example. Some of the more prominent trends in academic publishing and in the research ecosystem are where AI is being applied in automated labs, knowledge graphs and relationships maps, which is what we do at Wisdom.ai, and I'll talk about it more. Machine-generated hypothesis experiments, such as what Adam the robot was doing. A lot of the work in this space is going towards identifiers to map the research landscape that Adam also talked about briefly. And these basically provide the groundwork to run all of these algorithms. As we talked already, it's being applied to predict diseases. Much narrowing it down to academic publishers and where they are actively using it. Basically, it's machine learning and NLP that is being applied across areas in the publishing cycle. So it's being used to identify, detect plagiarism, detect any fabrication of data, and where it has been fudged to get to desired results. And it can bring up those elements much more with greater precision than a human analysis. It is also being used to improve discoverability of the content using NLP, and also such as some of the work that we do is around identifying emerging research areas by looking at the funding trends and where the grants are going. We are also, AI is also being widely applied in the peer review process to identify potential peer reviewers through author disambiguation of the existing corpus of publications. So what we're doing basically at Wisdom.ai is looking at the different data sets that are siloed across the various stakeholders in the research ecosystem, across industry, academia, governments, publishers, and funders. And we integrate all of this data together, taking them out of these silos so that each one of these stakeholders is able to get a comprehensive view of the global research ecosystem for their decisions. We get our data, we partner with a lot of funders, publishers, identifiers, and organizations that are indexing research. And this is some area that, you know, would give some food for thought for potential business models as reproduction rights organizations here as well. What we do is then we take 90 million data, about 90 million publications, and combine it and link it with around $850 billion of funding data, with patents, with clinical trials, to build a 360-degree view of the global research landscape. And we use AI and machine learning to interconnect this in a knowledge graph format, which means that you can ask it any sort of questions. All of this is presented in intuitive dashboards for decision making. Even if you're not a data scientist or data analyst, you should be able to make use of this information. So we asked Wisdom.ai questions like, what are the fastest growing research topics over the last 5 years? And we saw that graphite oxide is one of the fastest growing research topics by the number of publications in this area, increasing by over 60% each year, followed by CRISPR and some similar topics. And so if as a research organization and as a researcher, as an academic publisher, you're looking for experts who are in this field publishing, we've presented that in a very intuitive format. So you can just search in a search bar for graphite oxide. This is where the publications are published, the researchers and institutions who are publishing the most in that field, and ranked by country, so you can filter that down by different country as well, and see who are the leading researchers who publish the most in graphite oxide from that institutions. Where these topics are discussed, what are the other topics discussed simultaneously? The funding trend, you can see the peak over there. Who is funding that research? The publications have peaked as well, which has led to the boom, and top publishers who are, and the journals who are publishing that, and how much of that published research in graphite oxide is open access. So as you could see, this is okay, it's just repeating. Okay, so if you were able to catch that, went by pretty fast, but we saw that NTU, Nanyang Technological University, was the top institution publishing the most research on graphite oxide from that visualization. So if you're NTU and or you're an institution or library at NTU, then how can you measure your progress towards open access? Because this week is the open access week, and this is a big debate among and a big topic of discussion among academic publishers as well as institutions. So we can help navigate these challenging waters as well through some of the insights that we're able to get from all of that data using AI. And we can identify what journals are publishing NTU's open access articles. So this is something that we're just launching this week, where you can see the open access trend for a particular institution, how their publications have grown in this area, how the impact is greater very often of OA articles compared to non-OA publications. Sorry, that kind of just gonna. And the global distribution of citations. So OA papers tend to be cited in a more dispersed geographical distribution and in a greater number than non-OA articles. So the researchers at NTU who publish articles, which publishers do they publish them with and in which journals? And by publisher as well, you can see a greater level of detail that where the articles at NTU are being published that are open. We also have provided analytics for about 73,000 journals already. These are all automatically generated without, even without having the full text content from publishers. So we use Crossref and PubMed metadata at the moment, but obviously having access to more data and a greater corpus over there enhances the precision of these analytics. So the basic idea is that the data can help you analyze, compare, and grow your research performance no matter which stakeholder you are. Just to end my presentation, I would just, one of the limitations that we very often oversee when working with artificial intelligence and these algorithms is that they are not going to perform better than the people who built them, which means that they're always going to reflect the biases that they were built with. So we cannot expect them to not be racist or not base future performance on past, use past performance as a predictor of future performance if we don't do it themselves and we don't realize those biases as a first step and then make an effort to overcome those in those algorithms. So there is a way to get past it, which is recently Amazon landed in hot waters because its algorithm, the AI tool that it had developed was gender bias, but that was because it did not make an effort to recognize and overcome their bias in that algorithm, whereas LinkedIn is doing the opposite with that. So it's basically all about how we program it. And it's on a constant upward learning curve. And the whole idea is that it's not going to replace humans at any time, but we need to make the most of the technology that we have at the moment to improve our decision-making capabilities. That's all. You can explore more online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Sadia and to all our speakers this morning. Much appreciated. And a lot of information, a lot of food for thought. Before we get into the brief conversation we have time for here, I just want to check whether there's questions in the room. We have roving mics, as you know, so who'd like to go first? Tracy. You're not allowed to ask Babis questions. You can do that on the flight home.
No, I'm just going to ask generally.
Yeah.
Two things came to my mind if I was an audience member sitting here today. One is, if I'm sitting in an IFRRO today, should I be panicked if I'm not using blockchain? I'm kind of asking this question for the whole room, right? I think that's one question, is like, wow, I'm not doing this, and what does that mean for me, and am I in deep trouble, and what can I do? And then the other thing that crossed my mind in regard to machine learning is, can we give some examples of how CMOs today could be using machine learning, or maybe in the case here are using? We have two significant CMOs sitting up here, and also from a now member of the Informa family, how can we be using machine learning in just elemental ways just to enhance our works repositories or rights repositories, etc.? Those are my two thoughts.
Thank you, Tracy. Who'd like to take that first? Babis? Adam? With the blockchain piece first, obviously.
That's what's known as a hospital pass. I'm happy to answer those. Look, I think my sense of blockchain is it's really very much in the early days. Everyone I talk to says it's, that lots and lots of companies are just doing relatively small things and learning by doing. So I don't think you need to be panicked. No, it's the first thing. But I do think, like the internet, when it came along, what seems like eons ago, people need to be aware of it and look at it and think through its implications and, use it as a way of turning something into an opportunity, not a threat. And I mean, I genuinely think a lot of speakers have said to me, and a lot of people in the room said, look, these things don't work unless you get the right rules embedded in them, unless the rules are signed off by people who are authoritative, and that you can then ensure that the rules are adhered to, or at least the systems and the machines adhere to the rules. And so in the case of the example, the thing we're doing with the visual arts, is in the resale royalty scheme as an example. I could envisage blockchain doing all of that, but at the moment we only have a resale royalty scheme for artists in Australia, and we want to make sure that we have it for artists in a reciprocal manner outside of the country. Someone needs to advance that case to the government, someone needs to get the government to change the policy, and then someone needs to make sure that the machines implement the policy. And so my sense is there is always a role for a trusted party like a CMO to do those things down the track. But we need to be aware of it and to think through the implications. And then what was the second question? I'm sorry, Tracy. AI.
AI.
Looking.
No, not AI.
Machine learning.
Oh, no.
I was specifically asking about how could we, do we have any examples of how it's being used? How it could be, or how it could be used today? I don't know.
We have been doing a little bit of work there, not a lot. I mean, we're using AI, not machine learning, as a way of just matching different, matching texts that we get in from our surveys with what we have in our database. But machine learning, I wish I could say yes, but I can't think of an example we've yet deployed.
Around your question regarding machine learning and how that is being applied already, a lot of what we do and what publishers generally are doing is around disambiguation to find key opinion leaders. So, for example, identifying if John Smith at the same university working in two different departments, they're two different people and not the same person. How can you determine that? Because if the institution is the affiliation, there is no way to really identify. So we do a lot of cluster analysis. For example, looking at the timeline of their publication, looking at their age, looking at their co-authorship network, and a lot of different factors to basically apply machine learning to determine that these are indeed two different people, and then building their profile, and then matching this profile with a person who has received a grant from a different funder. That's another John Smith, or probably the same John Smith. So how do you determine that? So these are areas where it is actually being applied, and how it helps, for example, the academic publishing communities to identify peer reviewers, their editorial board members, key opinion leaders for example, a pharma company working on a patent. and so on. So that's one way. It's similar to that, but it's not machine learning, it's NLP. It's widely being used at the moment in discoverability. But as a CMO, I think I really like the work that CCC is doing around XML for mining. Because in the future, discoverability is, I think, a debate of the past that was supposed to have been done 10 years ago. I think we're way behind that. I think the future is where this huge corpus of publications is basically catching dust because it cannot be read and analyzed by human brain. And so there comes in AI, and for it to ingest and analyze that research, it needs to be in a machine readable format with the right licensing, allowing any organization, whether it's third-party services like ours, academic publishers, libraries, researchers, to analyze that content at pace and having the right licensing to do that, whether it's for commercial purposes, for non-commercial purposes, but allowing rights to mine that content, which currently are very limited and very difficult to come by, and one of our biggest challenges. So that is where I think there is a direct application to this audience where they can help.
Yeah, I can make a few brief comments. Well, what are computers used for? Computers are used to execute something that's done more than once. And what is machine learning? Machine learning allows us to do something more than once that we don't have to program it how to do it, but it learns from the data that it's fed. So that's anywhere where you can use prior data to expand the action that the software is going to take so that it can continuously be updated rather from the data, rather than from the programmer. That's where machine learning is good for. So from processing the data that an IFRRO, for example, we get from feeds from the publishers or other systems, identifying how to organize that information, being able to search that information better. Because yes, discoverability issues have been solved, but it's not quite there yet. And the key element in that area is personalization and contextualization. That's an area where machine learning can help enormously. Anybody today can download Lucene, and it's an open source search engine, the best of its kind, or buy a commercial product and build an index. Okay, so TF-IDF technology is decades old, so we're not going to talk about that. But personalization and contextualization is very important, and it's very important for a number of ways. Not only depends on who your customer is, depends what your data are, depends what your system is, what kind of interactions the user has with the system, and so on. So I can keep going on and on and on where you can use it. I would say if you have a question, find me later and ask me if it would be applicable to your case. I'll be happy to tell you.
I have a question which is, in a sense, supplementary to Tracy's, and it focuses on that area of the relationship between experimentation and scale. Our community represented in this room is very diverse in terms of size. Large ROs, small ROs, medium size, working in very different economic conditions around the world. The experimentation you've been able to do, Babis, then you've been able to do, Adam, is it possible because of the size of your organizations? And the converse is true. Are there opportunities that are graspable if you're not of the scale of CCC and CAL? And is the answer to that somehow linked to partnerships, good partnerships?
Yes. No, I mean, look, obviously, I think that if you are, I mean, you're right, Michael, in the implications of your question. If you're a larger CMO, you have capacity and you have the ability to look at things and think about how they might impact, and then to spend some money which isn't going to give you a super quick return, or indeed no return at all. I mean, I'd like to say one could build this platform, saying the one we're talking about, and we've just started. We actually haven't even yet finished the request for tender, but in a manner that was scalable and everyone could plug into it. But I'm sure that it's not quite that simple. And so I think for smaller companies, it is it's absolutely a matter of getting up partnerships. Yeah. But you can build, in the work we've done, you can build a blockchain system comparatively cheaply. Like the quotes we got from people to do it in China and India is like for $50,000, which I know is for some people a large amount of money, but for the future it's not. That the smarts are in the rules you embed in it, not the kind of technical aspects that underlie it.
Thank you. I noticed Carlo, I think, had a question at the back. If we could get a microphone for Carlo, that would be great.
Thank you. My question is to all the panel. Copyright is can be viewed as a system to incentivize sharing information. So you're protected and you give access to knowledge in that way. And with the data that you need for these type of technologies, what is this sort of the phenomenon of the person who only looks for the keys where the light is? I mean, how do you get that data that is so important if there's no incentive to make the data available? Have you thought into that, or how do you select data to begin with?
Do you want to try on that?
I think I did briefly discuss this in the previous question. Well, data is key for any algorithm related to artificial intelligence, and there's no way to work around that. So in my presentation, I discussed that, you know, it's currently all of the data around the research ecosystem, it's locked up, and the primary stakeholders we've identified are basically academic institutions, publishers who hold a large corpus of these publications and guard them as custodians very protectively. So I think with the movement around open access, it's not just about access to read that information, it's also about open data and access to the insights that you can gain from all of that information, and that can feed these algorithms very well. And so it's a movement. It's not going to be solved overnight. All of these basically the economic model demands that there is a need for this, and as more and more organizations are working on leveraging technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain, as the demand for this data grows, you know, there will be need for organizations like yourself, or more acceptability of sharing data by the different stakeholders, whether it's funders, whether it's publishers. Actually, a lot of time we speak to funders around the world. The problem is not that they're not willing to share their data or license it. The problem is that they don't even keep their data in a format that they can analyze themselves. And so it's basically at every organization, the first step that needs to be taken is to understand that the data that you're recording, first of all, record data, record all the information, record all the metadata in a machine readable format, and then record it accurately. Not just something that, you know, for example, if you want to index publications in Crossref, let's just put all dates on the date of indexing as the publication date. That doesn't help, and that reflects in all of the analysis that we present at our end. These are the first two steps that are very, very critical at all organizations, and then the next step is to make it accessible and share that, because it's one community and it's one ecosystem, and holding it together is going to present a very siloed picture that neither your organization nor anybody else will be able to work out of in progress.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me to say something on this. As Adia mentioned earlier, CCC actually many years ago took the initiative, as you know very well, Carlo, of creating a corpus of scientific articles that the customers can come and license and obtain legal copies of for the purpose of machine learning, of text data mining. And that's great. I think we should be thinking about the topic that was brought up yesterday a lot more. In other words, is the information inferred from the copyrighted articles copyrightable itself? What kind of rights, if there are rights there, should we apply, and how should they be governed? There is no, to the best of my knowledge, there is no framework around that. There are no policies. Frankly, I doubt many people are thinking about it. So I think it's a great question, and an open topic for discussion.
We're getting very close to the time when we need to end, as lunch is approaching, but probably could take one final question if there is one in the room. That mention of lunch has distracted you all now. Okay, I know Babis and Adam, and I think Shahir will be here for lunch.
Yes.
So I'm sure they'd be delighted to answer questions individually over the lunch break. So it just remains to ask you to join me in thanking them for what I thought was a great session. Thank you.
So that's where you are? Or that's where you are?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's Caroline's just announced lunch, and lunch is served. All right. 2 o'clock, everybody back, please, for the European group meeting. Thank you, in this room.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Babis. Thank you.
Lovely. Oh, sorry. Lovely to see you. I'll probably see you down at lunch.
Yeah.